Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, August 5th, 2025, and today we are talking about what to look for in a hoop house, when to start fall cover crops, and mushrooms are easier than you think. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year will be brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil. If you're looking for compost or propagation mix, check out tilthsoil.com. Link will be in the show notes. I hope your weeks are off to a good start. I can see it's going to be back to hot later this week, so that's fun. But I got to say, I'm enjoying the reprieve, maybe more than any reprieve in history, but I'm also a big lover of hyperbole, so, take that for what it's worth. I don't have a lot to report about yesterday, just got some harvesting done, but I did find a few spare minutes before soccer practice to shuck some sweet corn to freeze for the winter, which is one of those things similar to perhaps canning tomatoes, I suppose, where we are always exhausted when we have to do it because it happens in the middle of the summer, but we never regret doing it, getting the food put by, as they say, when the winter hits. If I don't give Charlie her own ear of corn, she will attack me while I'm shucking these. Ditto the watermelon juicing that I started on this weekend. In fact, one thing I love about seedless watermelons is that you have to grow these extra seeded sort of pollinator melons that just have a ton of seeds to get the seedless varieties, and those the fruit that the pollinators make. It makes for pretty good juice. It's kind of hard eating because, like I said, it's like extra seeds. But anyway, I consider those my juicing crop, so that's nice. Oh, and don't forget that we love seeing your farms and gardens too. If you have a 20-second clip showing off your farm, your garden, your project, your harvest, whatever it is, or something you're just proud of in the garden, a single plant, a crop, whatever it may be, send it along to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Those have been super fun to see, and we've got lots of great feedback from you all. I think it's really cool and really helpful to see other farms and gardens and farmers and gardeners, for that matter, how different they all look and can be. I don't know, maybe gives you some inspiration. Very cool stuff. Love having you all be a part of the show. All right, so today I thought we would talk about when to start those fall cover crops, because that's coming up now, at least for us. First, though, just a quick PSA that you should not plant a cover crop till you know your garden plan for next year. And also, you have to know how you are going to terminate said cover crop. For instance, if you're planning to use a rye cover crop, it won't just die on its own. Well, it will, but that death comes with a lot of seeds. Instead, you want to know how you're going to kill that cover crop if you plan to overwinter a cover crop. But I've done cover crop termination segments already and videos in the past, so I'm not going to do that here so much. But I want to focus instead on when to get those in the ground. But I just have to emphasize those things that I just emphasized, because cover crops done wrong are just weeds done right. That's terrible, but I'm keeping it. Anyway, after some trial and error, we have found that winter kill cover crops like peas must be in the ground by mid to late September here in Kentucky, Zone 6B. However, if you were in a warmer climate, say a few hours south of here, you might want to wait a little longer in the fall, because what you don't want is the peas flowering and going to seed before they die. Flowers are okay, and we usually get, some amount of flowers, which isn't that's not a bad thing. It's when they start to create large pods and those pods get a little bit mature. That is when things get risky. So preferably you get them into the soil, the peas or whatever, with enough time to get tall and mature, but not enough time to turn into seeds. If they start to load up with pods, it might be worth just mowing them down. If you are in a cooler climate than I am, then you will want to plant your winter kill cover crops a little earlier than we do, which is, again, is mid-September. How much earlier will depend on where you are. But if I'm saying mid-September here in Zone 6B, I would say, arbitrarily add a week for every zone you go down. So, and this is, again, completely arbitrary and will require some experiment on your part, but mid to early September for Zone 5B, maybe late August to early September for Zone 4B, and so on. Now, super far south regions that don't get hard frost, for instance, you will have to choose either very frost-sensitive crops like sorghum, Sudan grass, or something like that will die easily in a frost, or just something that you can terminate fairly easily, like buckwheat. And in a tropical region, well, you can't really have a winter kill cover crop at all without a winter, so your cover crop options will be different than mine, but also you probably could just be growing all winter and then doing your cover cropping in the summer, So you don't need advice there so much. Just grow veggies and then cover crops that are easy to terminate, or just cover cropping in the summer when the crops aren't as easy to grow. Now back to sort of my zone or zones around me. As for winter hardy cover crops, you also don't want them to put on too much biomass before winter, like rye, vetch, or winter wheat, etc. Because sometimes once they start getting those hard frosts, they'll die. So we don't like to sow these before mid-October in general. We want them to germinate and establish, but we definitely do not want them to get so big that they die in the first hard freezes, and then we don't have that cover crop in the spring. Then, as I've said before, I don't plant things like Lacey Phacelia until the late winter because it will die in the hard freezes. It's not that winter hardy unless it's super small. You may be able to overwinter it in slightly warmer regions than what we're in, though, because we are just on the cusp of getting Lacey Phacelia to survive, so long as it's relatively small, still going into winter. Anyway, let me know what you all know about all this for your regions or your cover crop goals. I know that some of you in the far north can't do things like rye and vetch because it won't really be ready to terminate until you are like midway through your season, so that's not always helpful. And then for others of you, things like crimson clover, they won't be as winter hardy as they are here. So anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, what to look for in a hoop house is not just the name of a popular dating show. It could be. BRB.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Adam Van Queek, who writes, quote, I purchased a skeleton of a hoop house for $850 a few months ago. It came with 7 12-foot hoops, 2-foot stakes for the hoops to go in, a center 24-foot purlin, and brackets that connect the hoops to the center channel with no pre-drilled holes. Do you think I got overcharged? What else should I get or think about before setting up this hoop house? What should a new farmer look for when buying a hoop house? End quote. All right, great questions here. First, I don't know if you got overcharged, but that will partially depend on the quality of the materials, and maybe even the quality of the directions. In fact, most prefab hoop houses at that size will be probably more expensive than that, at least by like 1.5 times or so. So in theory, you did get a deal. Also, that center purlin, those are often left loose without screws, thus no pre-drilled holes there. I don't know this for sure, but I believe that is to add some amount of give to the tunnel so that it's not quite as rigid like when heavy winds blow, but I could be wrong about that. But that may help explain the lack of pre-drilled holes. Now, if you're talking about lack of pre-drilled holes all over the tunnel, just depends on the tunnel, depends on the design. Now, as for what to look for in a small tunnel like this, excellent question. Some of this will depend on your goals and startup capital, but there are a few things I think are essential and a few things I think are nice additions if you could afford them. First, the essentials for me, wind bracing is critical. That would mean wind bracing in the front that goes from the bows to the end wall, and wind bracing that travels from one side of the bow to the other across the tunnel widthwise. These are called trusses. Without wind bracing, tunnels can be easily smashed by harsh winds. Like you asked what I would think about before setting up the tunnel, wind would be top of mind. Whatever you can do to prevent wind from smashing it or throwing it at a neighbor's property is pretty high in my book of things to look for in a tunnel. Especially on loose soils like sand, if you can add ground anchors like they use for, mobile homes, for instance, at each end with a rope, that will also help to keep the tunnel in place. Another essential perhaps is making sure that you have a way to roll up or pin up the plastic on the sides during hot days so you can kind of open it up for cross ventilation. Our tunnels pretty much stay open from May until October, so that has to be something you can manage easily, because in the spring you'll have to open and close it every day. During the summer you have to leave it that whole time, but it actually kind of has to stay that way. So you don't want a bunch of wind coming through, blowing the sides closed, and then the sun coming out and then cooking everything, which is really not what you want for veggies while they're still in the ground. Your door, like the door, how you get in and out of your tunnel, will matter quite a bit too. Make sure whatever you use for your doors can be opened and closed easily, and any equipment you might want at any point to fit into that tunnel, you'll need to be able to fit through that space. So for instance, if you're using a BCS with like 30-inch implements, you need to make sure that you at very least have like 34-inch clearance, because you're also going to have to turn a little bit probably when you get inside of it. I also like a door on each side for airflow. So you have one in the back and one in the front, and that way the air can travel not just across the tunnel on warm days, but also all the way across the tunnel lengthwise. Now, in terms of other considerations, site preparation is really important. Plan for drainage. Try to make it relatively level, the area where it's going if possible. All that stuff is really important. If you want electricity like fans or heaters or something at some point, you're going to want to get that electricity installed probably before you put the tunnel in. Not necessary, but it's ideal. Also, and I'm talking wind again, I like to point our tunnels towards the prevailing winds because I don't want the broadside exposed to heavy winds if at all possible. Another thing to consider is the irrigation. Where is your water source and how are you going to get that to the tunnel? Now, sometimes the best deals you can get are from people who will sell you their old tunnel, but you have to take it down and transport it. Be careful with this. You really would need to mark every single bow and piece perfectly and accurately so that it fits back together, because the tunnel will shift and mold itself over the years, and there's almost no way to put it up exactly as it was before. And it just gets really hard because the holes won't line up exactly the same depending on how deep you pounded the stakes. Then you're going to end up re-drilling all those holes, which can be a profound amount of work and also cause other issues like, rips in the plastic or just a lot of holes in your metal, and not to mention a lot of time that it would take. For sure, you can save money taking down an old tunnel, but it can also be a nightmare to put back together and potentially not quite as robust and sturdy, thus kind of deleting some of those savings. There are other things I could add here for sure, like my love of the ridge vent, but in terms of a basic tunnel, those are, I think, the kind of important things. I will let the comment section add their thoughts. Lots of smart growers in there that have lots of thoughts on tunnels, I'm sure. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, mushrooms. They'll come back with us. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. We know it's peak season, you're busy, but the messages you send now are what drive renewals later. That's why Farmhand is offering free instant access to their farmer-built newsletter builder. No demos, no setup fees, just drop your logo, upload your list, and start sending farm-branded emails that boost sales, engage members, and save you hours each week. Get free access today at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, mushrooms. I love mushrooms, and I've been thinking about them more and more lately as our protein bill, meat bill, continues to rise. Throughout our history as a farm, we have grown mushrooms in like several different forms. But I don't think I ever would have tried them had somebody not told me at some point, mushrooms, oh yeah, you can grow them. Anyone can grow them. They're super easy. So I'm going to do that for you. I remember part of my job on my first internship was dunking the shiitake logs in a pond overnight and then hauling them back up to lean them against a tree for fruiting. Then they fruited these like giant, beautiful shiitake mushrooms that we sold at the market. I was like floored by this. It was incredibly simple and bountiful, and mushrooms, in fact, have a long history of being market garden items, as Parisian market gardeners would cultivate agaricus varieties in caves beneath the city. So anyway, I thought I would go through a few easy mushrooms you can grow yourself with just some simple guidance. First is definitely shiitakes, because to me, not only do they keep better than most other mushrooms and they sell really well, but they are also just, I don't know, they're kind of the tastiest of the ones that you can cultivate at home to me. These can be grown in these sort of like sawdust growing mediums, which is a little bit more technical method and requires some humidity and light and temperature control. So my preference is really just grow them on logs. Basically, using the correct species of logs, typically maple, oak, or even cherry will work. Cut fresh logs into 3 to 4 foot lengths at 4 to 8 inch diameters, and though there's quite a bit of wiggle room there. You basically drill holes, stuff them with spawn you buy from a purveyor with a special like stuffing tool. We like Field to Forest, but there are other good regional purveyors. And then you cap that with some wax, and 9 months later, you get a colonized log that will fruit multiple times in a year, which you can force or you can just allow it to happen naturally, sort of after rains. We used to have mushroom parties, which are not what they sound like, where friends would come and spend the day filling the mushrooms and then capping them with us, and we'd bust out like 50 or so logs, which was huge. I mean, they do take a fair amount of work. There's a little more to the process, timing of when you cut the logs and how you cure them for like a couple weeks, and the stacking and the colonization and the identifying of the trees and all that stuff. But in terms of an agricultural agricultural product. It's fairly simple and does not require a huge amount of tools or space or capital. And of course, shiitakes rule in the kitchen. They're just awesome to have around. Next is oysters. These are much faster into production, but much more perishable. Like instead of 9 months to get the colonization of the actual log, in the case of oyster mushrooms, you can have some in as little as like 8 weeks from now. So they can also be grown in bags or in bins or totes, on straw in climate-controlled conditions. And I recommend Trad Cotter's book. I think I have it. The Organic Mushroom Farming and Microremediation, Simple to Advanced and Experimental Techniques for Indoor and Outdoor Cultivation. Great book. I will link that one in the show notes. Or they can also be grown on poplar logs in a slightly different system than shiitakes that involves stacking the logs over the spawn and covering them with trash bags to encourage the colonization. And then you take the trash bags off and then they start to produce the mushrooms. Then you can either soak those logs or let it, just harvest after they get rained on and the temperatures change and all that stuff. You get nice flushes that way. I mean, giant flushes of mushrooms. Another set of mushrooms worth looking into, especially if you have ample manure, are the agaricus varieties, buttons, and portobellas. These grow in compost piles in the dark and they can be quite delicious. There's another variety called almond agaricus that I don't love, but it smells like almonds and can be grown in the ground in compost. We grew some one year in a bed and they were okay, but we didn't really give them the attention that they really needed. One mushroom, however, that can be grown in the ground and almost needs no attention is the winecap stropharia. I mentioned this one last week, and it can be grown in wood-chipped pathways really easily, kind of giving you, some amount of product out of your pathways, which is cool. I have some questions and concerns about how they affect native fungal populations, but I can't find a lot of research that really investigates that too much. There does seem to be some significant nematocidal effects from winecap stropharia rugosa annulata, which is the scientific name, which is kind of interesting. I came across some research that showed fairly substantial drops in root knot nematode populations from winecap stropharia mycelium. So maybe for those of you struggling with root knot nematodes, it may be worth getting some of that winecap substrate there in your pathways with some wood chips. So just a thought. And note to me that I need to research that more because that is very fascinating. But essentially, these winecap stropharia devour the wood chips, which makes the nutrients therein more available to your plants. And then they produce huge fruits of mushrooms, which can be sold to chefs or farmers markets or whatever. The texture is a bit odd. It's kind of, kind of chewy. But I have made some really nice jerky out of them before, so that works. I did a whole video on these a few years back that you can watch too. Anyway, I love mushrooms. They often are grown in less desirable places like shady areas. They can be highly productive or as productive as you want them to be based on the amount of work you're willing to put into them. And they often use something you don't need, like maybe an oak tree fell on your property. Some shiitake logs may at least give you something to be excited about for the cleanup. For me, if you're trying to maximize a small property, mushrooms are a no-brainer. Anyway, what are your mushroom loves? Otherwise, we're going to leave it there until Feedback Friday, but call this a Tuesday. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat like this one or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com. That helps to support what we do here and what we'll be doing in the future, which is awesome. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of August, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Terra Basics, but like Terra like the earth, which is cool. We're cool with Earth stuff here. All right, so you will remember there was a mysterious snowstorm that occurred right in the middle of the summer in the very warm state of Tennessee and in the very warm part of that state in the south part. And our hero of today's story, a young man named Douglas, was playing outside when the snowstorm hit. But what Douglas saw, just by his good fortune that no one else saw, was a cave open up just on the other side of the creek from where he lives. He saw it begin to open, and then suddenly the snow hit, and then you couldn't see anything. And then when the snowstorm was done, he saw that sort of cave slowly close again. Now, he had lived in that area for all 12 of his years, and he had never seen a cave before. So the next day, he decided to go investigate, and that's when he found, digging through some of the mulch there, a door. A door to what? Well, that is for tomorrow on The Door to Winter, a far too dramatic title for a story about a 12-year-old. But anyway, Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Then being tomorrow. Tomorrow being Wednesday. Wednesday being a good day. Hopefully. Bye. Can you hear the soccer coach voice that I have today? Haven't had to do that much loud talking in a while. Anyway.